Okay, there you go. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Guys, I know you've probably seen that I've started a bunch of projects and it feels like I'm never going to finish them, but here's another one. This is my V50. As you saw in the last video, we used the frame to test Rick's motor. And now that the motor's all done, I'm going to pack it up and send it back to him, and he can have some fun with it. But rather than stick this old motor back into the frame, which I have no idea if this works or not, we're going to go ahead and rebuild this one. I know this motor build was all new stuff, probably stuff you'll never mess with. So yeah, I wanted to do a refresh of a stock motor, and that way you're kind of familiar with what I'm working with here when you start to work on your own. All right, so yeah, if you guys are ready, let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is remove the shrouds. Pretty easy. It's just these flathead screws all the way around it. Now I got the shrouds off. We're going to remove the flywheel. Now on the flywheel, if you look in here, there is a snap ring and it's in a groove. Okay, so when you loosen the nut, it actually pushes against the snap ring. The snap ring is connected to the flywheel, and that's how it pops it off. Okay, so let me show you real quick. I have my little impact gun here. I'm just going to slightly tap it. Okay, just like that. Flywheel pops off. All right, if yours is missing the snap ring right there, you got to get another one. That's how you remove the flywheels on these small frames. Now that the flywheels are removed, you see the stator right here. Go ahead and pull the spark plug boot off. Remove the, let's see, I think there's 3 flathead screws in here that hold the stator on. All right, you got the 3 screws removed. Let's go ahead and pull this flywheel out of there, along with the wiring. Old wiring. All right, there you go. Okay, so now I'm gonna pull the cylinder off. It's just 4 11mm bolts on the top. Because it's a 50cc, it actually bolts, the head bolts separately from the cylinder. On the 90s and up, they actually use the long studs that come out of the case. Head comes off. Cylinder looks pretty good. Maybe somebody might want that. All right, so now you have to remove the nuts from the base of the cylinder. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the cylinder will actually come out. All right, so on this side, I'm actually having trouble getting those nuts off, so I will remove this exhaust manifold. Get more room. Same with this guy right here, the intake manifold. I'll remove that too. Just 2 10mm nuts right there. One on the bottom. All right, now I got the exhaust manifold off. You can take this nut off, hopefully. Whew, I felt like it was going to strip, but good thing it didn't. Otherwise I'd be in trouble. All right, now I got all the manifold stuff off. The nuts off the base of the cylinder. I'm going to try to knock the cylinder off. I'm starting to come up. All right. A little baby piston. It's cute. Okay, now that we have the cylinder off, I'm gonna take the rear hub off. It's just this cotter pin in the back, and the nut. You can see this is a 4-lug back here. We'll convert this to 5 to match the front wheel. I already did the conversion up front. So to convert the rear, all you would need is a certain set of brake pads, I believe, and then the actual 5-lug hub. So it's very simple to convert the rear. All right, we got the cotter pin and the nut off. The nut was actually a 20 2mm. So get that off. So as long as your brake plate has 2 studs on it, you can do the conversion pretty easily. You just have to get the right brake pads, the Primavera brake pads. So that's how you do the conversion in the back. All right, now the hub's out of the way. Let's remove the brake plate. Just 3 13mm nuts. Next up, clutch cover. 6 10mm bolts. All right, so that's the small frame clutch, the stock one at least. A lot less complicated than the thing that I worked on over there. So remove the pressure plate first. Just push back on this little spring thing here. Should come right out. Sometimes it's a pain, but there you go. All right, so. All right, in there's a, well, this one looks a little beat up. So there's a washer in there, and one of the sides have been bent in to keep the clutch nut from backing out. So you're gonna have to unbend that washer to get that clutch nut out. Washer bent back out. It's a 17mm nut. Double check. Yep, 17mm nut. Undo that nut. Move that little lock washer. Okay. So to remove the small frame clutch, you need a small frame clutch remover. It looks like this right here. Okay. So this thing threads over the actual clutch. All right, we got the tool threaded in the clutch. Now we're gonna tighten the center, which is a 19mm bolt. Now pop the clutch out. All right, now I've got all the clutch stuff removed, the cylinder removed. We can remove the nuts from the actual case, 11mm all the way around, and then we'll separate the case. All right, so I got all the nasty hardware off the case halves, and I just remembered I totally forgot to drain the case. So I see oil leaking down the bottom. So yeah, next thing I'm gonna do is drain the case, but you guys should start by draining the case before you do anything. The drain bolt is the 11mm at the bottom of the case. Take that out, drain the oil before you do anything. Oh, okay, well, I guess there wasn't that much oil in it, but let's see. Let's drop this motor back down. I like this stand, but it's just a little too short. So if you guys pick up this stand, get a couple blocks and kind of mount it on a couple blocks. That way it raises the motor up. Probably make your life a lot easier. All right, I think that's drained enough. I'm gonna put the cap back on. I forgot to mention these engine stands are actually from Scooter Mercado. So if you want to pick a setup for yourself, make sure you reach out to Dave over there. Pretty cheap, only like 45 bucks, and they definitely come in really handy. So before you separate the case, let's go ahead and pull this nut off the crank. Gonna bend that little washer thing back, because somebody bent that over to lock the nut down so it doesn't back out. Remove the nut. Okay, so I just got the nut off. Spin the primary so this opening is lined up with the gear, then you can remove the gear. Okay, any other opening you can't because there's a lip. Okay, so that's how you get that off. Now that I have the gear off, you can carefully tap the case, and sometimes if you're lucky it'll just come apart, but if it's stuck you need a tool. So this is actually the crank removal tool. I use this because it actually pushes the crank and the case half off, or it separates them. So this is how this tool works. Thread these 4 bolts in and just screw the center bolt there, and then it'll separate the case. All right, now I got the tool threaded onto the case. Go ahead and tighten the center bolt. It should separate the case. Oh, okay, wasn't that bad. It starts pushing on the top here. There's an area down at the bottom here, which you can tap on, and it'll separate the bottom half. Yep, like that. So, there you go. Okay, next I'm going to remove the transmission, the output shaft. You need this tool here, or you can put the nut back on here and kind of tap it out gently. Don't bend this right here, because that's where the cotter pin goes through to lock the hub nut on. Okay, so just be very careful. Or you can get this tool. This tool bolts on the end like this. Okay. By the way, all these tools you can get from Scooter Mercado. Okay, I got this thing bolted on. We'll tighten the center and push the transmission out. Just like that. Now that I have the transmission removed, let's work on the kickstart stuff. So move the kickstart down a little bit, and this kickstart gear will pop right out, and the spring will follow it. Okay, so set that aside. It's a good idea to replace this when you rebuild the motor. Okay, usually they're worn out, so I will be replacing this. I'll use the same spring. Put that away. So on the kickstart spring, all you need to do is twist this, and get the hook off the quadrant, like that. Okay, that just pull it right off. You're good to go. Next thing we're gonna do, remove the bolt right there. I think that's a 14 millimeter. Remove the bolt, and the kickstart lever will separate from the quadrant, and you can get those two pieces out. All right, so I banged a flathead screwdriver in there to loosen up the kickstart lever, and it came right off the quadrant after that. Ooh, this thing's nasty. All right, I'm gonna put the bolt back in so I don't lose it. Back on this side, all you do is pull the quadrant out. Yeah, it looks pretty worn out. So there's a O-ring in there that you need to replace as well. And while you're at it, replace these little buffers. See how these are completely gone? If you watched my last small frame build video, I put new ones in. They look like this. Okay, so this is, I guess these are original, so because they're gone. This one's half of that part is there. So yeah, order these because they need to be replaced as well. So back up here, there's a washer that the kickstart spring wire is on. Go ahead and remove that. Okay. And then you'll see a snap ring that holds the primary or the clutch basket in place. Go ahead and remove that snap ring. Okay, snap ring around the clutch basket, primary. Get that thing off. So usually you give this thing light taps and it'll come right out. I have a Delrin block on there. Okay, I've got it knocked out of the case. Situate this so that the opening, this big opening, is towards the back, I guess. That way you can get it out, see? Alright, so next I'm going to remove the cable guide at the bottom of the case, rotate it all the way to the right, and then tap the pin out. The pin is tapered, so it only goes in one way. Alright, so we're going to tap it out this way. Okay. Pry the selector off, or I mean the cable guide off the bottom of the motor. I'll remove this 14 millimeter bolt. This actually presses the selector mechanism in place. So it's this, and there's a washer underneath. Make sure you save those because you need to reuse them. This one seems to be a little stuck. Yep, nice and dirty. Okay, after that, you can pull the selector mechanism out. Okay, there's a wave washer at the bottom here. Make sure you save that. It needs to go back on. All right, so let's pull the rubber out of it. That thing is hard as a rock. All right, crank seal on the clutch side. Two little. There you go. I don't know where that went, but it's okay. Okay, so I'm gonna remove the hub bearing. The special tool for it right here. Just gonna drift it out. All right, next I'll remove the snap ring that holds the clutch basket bearing in, the primary bearing, whatever this is. Snap ring removal first. And you can drift it from the other side, or you use your blind bearing puller, whatever you want to use. Just be very careful if you're going to drift it. Don't hit the case, because you might crack it. All right. All right, I'm going to hit it with my drift here. Perfect. And then the last bearing that's in this side of the case is going to be the crank bearing, which is also being held by a snap ring on this side. So remove that snap ring first. Drift it from left to right. This one might be a little tough. We might need to pull a blind bearing puller for it. It's really tight. So for this side of the case, the input shaft should just come right out like that. If it doesn't, you'll have to put the nut on here and get a slide hammer or something to get it off. So this is a 3-speed input shaft. We're actually going to be doing a conversion on this thing, so you have to get a 4-speed input shaft. So won't be using this anymore. So I think the crank is stuck. Usually it just comes right out. It's a 2-piece bearing on this side, but this guy is not cooperating. So I'm trying to tap it out first. It's a good idea to put the nut back on there, but I'm not going to be reusing this crank. So I'm going to get a couple taps and see if it comes out. This thing is stuck. I don't think there's a puller you can bolt onto here where you can tighten the center bolt to push it out. If there is, I don't have it, so I may need to use the press and press this thing out. We don't damage the case, hopefully. So all right, let me get it in my press, and hopefully you can get it out that way. See, I have it set up in my press. Like I said, I'm not going to be reusing this crank, so I don't really need to save the threads there. But it's a good idea to put the nut back on there before you start pressing on this thing. But I think it's flat enough where it's not going to really mess anything up, so we'll see what happens. Okay, there you go. Pretty painless. I guess this one didn't have the 2-piece bearing, that's why it came out together. I got this thing out, so let's move forward to the bearing removal of this side of the case. Okay, so now that I have the crank and the crank bearing out, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the fly size seal. Just hammer that out. All right, now I've got the seal out, we're gonna remove the input shaft bearing. I have used a slide hammer with a little hook and kind of just got it out that way. I've seen people pack this thing with grease, and then they get a rod that's perfectly the size of that inner hole, and they pound the rod into it, and the grease forces the bearing out from underneath. I've seen people do that. I've never done it myself. I always use the slide hammer method. It has worked for me, but now I actually have the SIP tool just for removing this bearing. So I'm gonna use a tool. This one here, I have always used my blind bearing puller to pull that one out. So let's start with removing this one with the proper tool. Okay. There you go. All right, there you go. Special tool. Okay, I'll grab my other blind bearing puller for that, and we'll get this one out as well. This one looks like this. This is the universal blind bearing tool set that I got from Screw Mercado. So put that in there. I have the pin in there. I'm gonna tighten this guy on, and then drop this bolt down. That pushes the pin down to spread those fingers. Grab onto the bearing. Okay, got that bearing out. All right, guys, I've got the engine completely disassembled. All the bearings removed, all the mechanisms. So we are looking pretty good. Now, if you guys are doing this at home, next step you need to do is check the rotary pad. All right, that's this guy right here. This thing right here. All right, make sure it's nice and smooth and you run your finger over it. Because if it's not, and you go and rebuild the motor may not run right. It's gonna act like it has an air leak. Okay, the rotary pad has to be perfect in order to work properly. Okay, so check that before you do the rebuild. But as far as this rebuild, we're looking pretty good. Obviously, I'm going to clean the cases up. We're going to be upgrading it from a 3-speed to a 4-speed. New primary, new crank, new cylinder, new pipe, new gaskets, seals, bearings, of course. So yeah, stay tuned for the next video. But guys, that's going to be it for this one. If you guys have enjoyed these videos so far, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll catch you all next time.